Hello there! The Star Wars retro series of action figures seem to be the popular items these days. Welcome to Unboxing the Boxes, my Star Wars collection. This is episode 180, the Star Wars retro figures of the Ahsoka television series. Collectors, like me, must be buying up these retro action figures because Hasbro keeps releasing more and more of them. I recently picked up all 7 of the retro figures released for the Ahsoka television series. Let's take a look at them and see how they compare to their vintage collection counterparts, or at least 3 of them. I've only got 3 of the 7 in the vintage. Of course, we'll do this after you like this video, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now, when we look these over, the first thing you notice when you compare them side by side is the cardboard back. The cardboard back of the vintage collection is actually nice and stiff. It's a little thicker. The cardboard back of the vintage or the retro series, pretty thin and flimsy. You can bend this one pretty easily. In fact, you'll notice that a lot of the cards are already somewhat warped, where the vintage collection stays pretty straight. So you can see there's a difference right there already between the two. And then, of course, you've got the used look with the edges like this compared to the brand new look that the vintage collection has. Some people like that, some people don't. That part doesn't bother me so much. For one thing, it lets a person know that this is a retro series of figure instead of the vintage collection. So that little edging touch makes a difference into how you see these right away when they're hanging on the pegs. The next one, of course, is what my finger's covering here, that big red sticker. And I wish, Hasbro, that you would reduce the size of that sticker. Yes, I understand why you put it on there, but really, do you need it on there like that when you've already got the edging done different than the actual vintage collection card? You've already got a difference between the two. Why do you need to put a big red sticker on it? Now, I also know there's some collectors out there that one of the first things they do is tear these stickers off the package. And, you know, I thought about it, and then I keep flip-flopping back and forth. Because one thing I keep thinking of is, well, this is the way it was packaged. This is the way the action figure is bought. Do I want to change it? Because you know me, I'm an in-the-box collector or on-the-card collector. So I kind of have mixed feelings about removing the sticker. And so far, I have not removed any of the stickers to the retro collection I have. I guess that's the way it's going to be, at least in my collection. The next is the back of the card. You'll notice on the back of this card, the retro card, we've got about 20 different languages. Well, no, it's not 20, but it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different languages written about the specifications and the copyrights and everything else. Where on the vintage collection, we actually get to see other figures that are part of the current wave, or at least that are coming out about the same time. You don't get that with these. However, you do get a little bit of a list down here that says what action figures are actually part of this series. So at least you got that. You don't get a picture of it, but you get a written explanation of what figures to go looking for. Now, of course, as the figures themselves go, there's a big difference because the retro series of figures are not very well articulated. And the Ahsoka series continues the same type of articulation that we've seen in previous retro figures. Basically, her arms move at the shoulders, her legs move at the hips, and I think the head turns, and that is about it. You've got 5 points of articulation. Where with the... This is not going to stand by itself. That's another thing. They're so thin and flimsy. Even the... I just noticed this. Even the bubbles are different. On the retro figure, the bubbles are much smaller than they are in the vintage. Now, as far as the articulation on the vintage figures go, there's a lot more articulation. We've got articulation at the shoulders, at the neck. The hands turn, the elbows move, the legs move at the hip, and most of the time, the knees move too, unless there's something in the way of the knees moving. So we've got a lot of articulation with the vintage series that we do not have with the retro series. So guess which one costs more? Yeah, and that's to be expected. When you've got a figure that's more complicated to make, it's going to cost more than the one that doesn't. But this represents what the figures were like back in the 80s when they were released. And this one represents the current day figures. Now, as far as the figures themselves go, as you can see, there is a lot of difference. Just from the looks of the sculpt, the Vintage Collection Ahsoka series is a much better looking figure. And that's because the technology used for that is a lot better. Plus, you can see Ahsoka comes with 2 clear lightsabers, where the Vintage Collection comes with 2 totally white lightsabers, just a one-colored lightsaber. And you'll also notice with the retro figure, it does come with a cloth cape. So yeah, there's a bit of a sculpt difference between them, and that's because of how they're made. Each one, though, does have its own charm. So when I first started collecting the retros back when the New Hope figures were out, I was thinking to myself, these are cheap figures, and I didn't understand yet at that point what Hasbro was trying to do. I now have a lot of retro figures, a lot of the series, and in fact, I've got a new series of retro figures on the way. So when I get those, we'll have to do another video of another series of retro figures. But there's the Ahsoka action figure comparison. Let's move on to the next one. The next one we'll compare is Morgan Elsbeth. You'll notice right away when you compare the two, the retro figure is a lot simpler again than the Vintage Collection. When we look at them side by side again, we do notice that, well, number one, the Vintage Collection figure comes with a cloth skirt, where the retro figure is completely plastic. You'll also notice that the face on the Vintage Collection is much closer to the actress than the one on the retro. In fact, the coloring on the hair is way off between one and the other. But really, when you look at it, considering what you have, retro action figure does actually look pretty decent. The main thing is the sculpt of the head and the face. But for what they are, again, just like the previous one, they're actually both well done. The retro figure is actually a very nice figure in this series. The last one of the three to compare is the HK-87 Assassin Droid. And wow, is there a huge difference between these two. And I'm not talking just the way the figure's made. I'm talking about the coloration. Look at that. Vintage Collection, Retro Collection. These look like two completely different action figures. They don't even look near being the same character or the same droid. If you look at the retro figure, it is actually a very nice looking figure with the cloth cape. We've got two accessories with the staff and the pistol. You look at the retro, it's, you could say blah. It's very blah. Just a pistol, and the color scheme they picked for it is kind of weird. In fact, when you look at the cards, you see the cards are even different. They've got a different picture of the Assassin Droid on it. Unlike the other two, where it's the same picture on it, they photoshopped them different on this one. It's the same pose for the Assassin Droid, but different characterizations of it. I have to say, as far as the Assassin Droid goes, I like the vintage figure much better than the retro figure. Now the next four, I just have the retro figures. I do not have vintage figures of them. So we're going to be moving a little quicker now. The first one is General Hera Syndulla. And I'm sure they're probably going to come out with a vintage figure of this. I just don't have it yet, and I don't know for sure if it's been released yet. But as we can see with this one, it is very kind of plain looking. There again, very much like a 80s action figure. Pretty much solid colors, not a whole lot of detail in the coloring, no aging or anything that you might see on the other vintage figures. Just comes with one accessory, and that's a pistol. Very, very basic as far as the mold goes. But overall, for a retro collection figure, it still is a good-looking figure. Now, if we've got Hera, we better have Sabine Wren. After all, she is a major character in the show. And when we look at Sabine's, there seems to be a little more coloring detail with Sabine. It actually looks better than the Hera figure did. We've got 2 pistols, 1 lightsaber. Now, of course, the pistols and the lightsaber are all solid color. They're not mixed up at all. And they're not black like the Hera is. And for some reason, they have a removable helmet, but instead of packaging it within the bubble, they made a separate little bubble up above it to put the helmet in. Kind of a weird thing to do, but you know, the bubbles are smaller, so they probably didn't have enough room to get the helmet into the main bubble there. Actually, I think this one is one of the better retro action figures from this particular series. What do you think? Leave a comment down below. The next one is our favorite droid from the series, if you like the good guys, and that would be Chopper. And looking over Chopper, we can see it's a very basic sculpt again. And this one reminds me very much of the way R2-D2 was done during the early days of action figures. Pretty much just a solid thing with kind of a sticker. And I don't know if that's really a sticker on it or if it's printed on there as far as his body details go. I do like the eyes. They did a good job on the eyes. And then, of course, we've got the third wheel there. So we do have all 3 legs. So overall, I think they did a nice job with Chopper. I do wish, seeing that Chopper is such a small figure and that it doesn't use near the plastic of the other figures, that they would have maybe put an accessory or 2 with it. But, you know, that's the way it is. The last one we've got here is Marrok. You remember Marrok? I think that's, or Marrok. I don't remember exactly how they said it in the show. But when we look at him, he comes with 1 accessory, and that's his double-edged lightsaber, of course. He does have a cloth cape. Pretty nicely sculpted body there. The helmet has some nice detail on it. If you put the little bit of articulation in there, like the vintage collection, you'd almost have a vintage collection figure here. But not quite, because it's still just the 5 points of articulation with just a solid color accessory again. But overall, this is another good action figure to add to the collection. Now, like I said, the cards for these figures is pretty thin. As we can see with the Sabine Wren, there's some bending and warping going on here. So what I'm going to be doing after this video here is each of these figures is going to be going in a star case, just to help keep the card straight and in good shape. I wish they made card cases that were a little thinner for these, but don't have the options that we had 10 years ago with these. 10 years ago, they had, I think, 3 different thicknesses of these compared to what action figures you were collecting. Now they kind of make one-fits-all type thing. Oh, well, I guess I can't blame the company, but it still would be nice to have the thinner ones. Well, what do you think? There we have the Ahsoka series of retro action figures. Overall, I like them. I think they're pretty well done for a retro figure. Hopefully at some point we see vintage collection figures of the ones that so far I do not have a vintage collection figure of. Would be nice if they all came out with the vintage collection. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. When you like it and subscribe, that lets YouTube know that there are people that do enjoy these videos, and I really appreciate it too when I see that. It keeps me fired up about doing these. Well, until next time, may the Force be with you, and keep collecting!